How is this woman an enemy of the state?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe, that someone who was solely standing outside of an abortuary where they're killing children legally through all 9 months of pregnancy where she's not permitted to stand outside with a sign to simply offer an alternative perspective to women.
She was just peacefully protesting with a sign that says, "Why mom when I have so much love to give?"
There needs to be a line, and if we live in a society with freedom of speech, then it needs to be absolute.
So she's already been charged. She's already spent time in jail for the last few weeks after she was arrested in early July. And so today she's going to be escorted by police in handcuffs into the courtroom.
David Menzies for Rebel News here in downtown Toronto outside the Ontario Court of Justice. And what brings me here today, folks, is that in about an hour, there will be a trial beginning for Linda Gibbons. She is the 75-year-old Christian grandmother who has been charged under the so-called bubble zone law, which is to say this legislation bans demonstrations or any kind of free speech outside of a abortion clinic. It's a 50-meter zone. Miss Gibbons is facing 4 separate charges of contravening the Safe Access to Abortion Services Act 2017. And she also faces a criminal charge of mischief. And as you can see behind me, folks, there's about 24 pro-Linda Gibbons demonstrators. They're here to support her. So we're going to go over and find out what this rally is all about and what they have to say about this grandmother being criminally charged.
Linda Gibbons, she's a 75-year-old grandmother who peacefully is praying and performing outreach outside of a Toronto area abortuary that kills children every single day. So her ministry involves holding a sign that reads, "Why mom when I have so much love to give," with a image of an infant on the sign reaching out to their mother. And so her ministry is to perform that outreach to women who are faced with crisis pregnancies and who are entering the abortuary about to have their children killed by abortionists. So her ministry is peaceful, it's loving, it's gentle. Unfortunately, with the bubble zone legislation, or the Safe Access to Abortion Services Act, that was established in 2017, she is in violation of this unjust bubble zone that prevents her from doing this life-saving ministry outside of abortuaries.
I think that it's problematic that we can't silently pray outside of an abortion clinic, that we can't even just stand there supporting pro-life efforts. I think that we live in a country where we have freedom of expression in our Charter of Rights and Freedom, and it's not being upheld in our society.
Every day in Canada, 300 unborn children are being massacred, whether it's being poisoned, starved by the chemical abortion pill and flushed down the toilet, or having their limbs dismembered by abortionist forceps, or having their skulls crushed. It's a barbaric procedure that should be banned. It's abhorrent to think that we have Christian grandmothers like Linda Gibbons who are being arrested for holding a sign, in a non-threatening, prayerful manner outside abortion clinic. What has happened to our democratic rights and freedoms in this country?
She was just peacefully protesting with a sign that says, "Why mom when I have so much love to give?" She does not talk to people unless people come and speak to her.
A lot of people, they unify to support Linda Gibbons and these other pro-life warriors who don't comply. It's like the state won't even have the resources to arrest us all.
Bubble zone legislation doesn't actually serve to protect people, because we already have laws to protect civilians from harassment, but we know that bubble zones are there to prevent pro-life witness outside of these centers that kill children.
Marco Mendicino, the Liberal MP, he wants a bubble zone for constituency offices so that neither he nor his staff have to deal with protests and demonstration. So a lot might say, is this the thin edge of the wedge? If we start, creating bubble zones all over all institutions and government buildings, well, where does it end? Where will you be able to demonstrate?
If it's in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we should have freedom of speech everywhere, regardless. I support people not being harassed outside of their house, but there needs to be a line, and if we live in a society with freedom of speech, then it needs to be absolute.
The issue is once you go out of the 15 meters, it's harder for people to see you, and harder for women who are being forced or coerced into an abortion, or women who want that help. It's harder for them to see you and to get to you. So it makes us less effective in reaching out to people who do need the help.
Can you tell us what was the ostensible policy reason for this law in the first place?
Well, the claim was that pro-lifers were supposedly harassing women outside of abortuaries, which we know may have happened in the past, but ultimately pro-lifers we witnessed very peacefully. And so we know that that likely wasn't occurring on a grand scale. And even so, as I mentioned previously, there is policy and legislation to charge people for harassment.
The liberal mindset, they think that pro-lifers are yelling at people coming into abortion clinics, or screaming at them, or just being mean to them, but in reality we're just silently giving pro-life witness or trying to give them resources that they need. So I don't think there is validity to these bubble zone laws.
And Maeve, has there ever been any consideration about a charter challenge based on free speech rights that you say are being eclipsed right now?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the goal, is to be able to repeal bubble zone legislation because of the unjust nature of the legislation, which, once again, prohibits our freedom of speech and freedom of expression, which is upheld in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
And of course, this legislation took effect before the Doug Ford PCs took office. Are you hopeful at all that the current provincial government might repeal the act, or, as in so many cases in Canada, abortion is considered a real third rail issue? Nobody wants to touch it. Politically, what do you see happening here in the province of Ontario?
It's hard to say. Of course, we are, through this campaign, through our desire to have Linda Gibbons freed or to repeal the bubble zone law, we are going to be lobbying politicians, encouraging them to put forth a motion to repeal this legislation that's so unjust. Obviously, with the PCs, we know that they aren't necessarily a pro-life party. Most politicians within the PC party are not pro-life, and therefore trying to appeal to them might be difficult. But of course, our goal is to have this legislation repealed by nature of the unjustness of it, which, infringes on our freedom of expression and freedom of speech.
When you see people doing these demonstrations outside of an abortion clinic, has a woman ever changed her mind? Has she ever been convinced, you know what, maybe there is another alternative to getting an abortion? Do you have any statistics on that or any anecdotal information?
I don't have any statistics, but I do know that in Toronto, for example, there is an abortion clinic right beside a women's health clinic. And oftentimes women accidentally walk into the women's clinic and they do change their mind because they just aren't aware of the resources that are there to help them. They aren't aware that there are pro-life resource centers willing to give them diapers, clothes, whatever they need.
Well, folks, I was just speaking to Maeve whether Linda Gibbons, after the trial, could come on camera for an interview, and the answer is a hard no, not because she's camera shy, but if you can believe it, she is already incarcerated and in handcuffs. Maeve, do I have this right?
Absolutely, yeah. So she's already been charged. She's already spent time in jail for the last few weeks after she was arrested in early July. And so today she's going to be escorted by police in handcuffs into the courtroom, and she'll also be leaving the same way in a police van. So unfortunately, we won't be able to have her join us here today for the protest.
Maeve, this is staggering. Toronto is going through its biggest crime wave in the city's history. Every major crime statistic is up. You even have gangbangers, those accused of attempted murder, getting out on bail. It's almost like a catch and release system. So that criminal element we give a second chance to, but a 75-year-old grandmother, she's incarcerated in handcuffs. How is this woman an enemy of the state?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe, that someone who was solely standing outside of an abortuary where they're killing children legally through all 9 months of pregnancy where she's not permitted to stand outside with a sign to simply offer an alternative perspective to women. But she was incarcerated for that loving, gentle, peaceful act. She's the one that they're spending their time prosecuting, and she's spending prison and jail time in order to prevent her from having that liberty.
Maeve, it is staggering again because I don't know Linda Gibbons, but I don't think this is a person who's at risk to assault somebody, to steal somebody's car, to murder somebody. It seems to be that in the eyes of the justice system or the political class, she is guilty of a thought crime, and for that there really is no forgiveness.
Yeah, absolutely. She's definitely there to be gentle, to be peaceful, to offer a loving option to women. And so it is unbelievable that someone who with so much gentleness and grace is being targeted with this bubble zone legislation. It's really saddening and heartbreaking.
Well, it was a very short court proceeding. Even though the court began at 10 a.m., it wasn't until almost 11 a.m. that Miss Gibbons was led into the courtroom. And bizarre sort of sight. She's a frail 75-year-old grandmother, yet she had her hands handcuffed behind her back. And when the judge addressed her, saying, "Good morning, Miss Gibbons, good morning, Miss Gibbons," Miss Gibbons did not reply, and that led to the judge saying, "Okay, Miss Gibbons is remaining mute." And not much to report other than the bubble zone breach charges. That's been adjourned to October 22nd. The mischief charge has been adjourned to August 20th. And that's not to say that the trial would take place on those dates. That is to say that a trial date will be set, hopefully, on those dates. And I can tell you, as Miss Gibbons was led out of the courthouse, handcuffed behind her back yet again, her supporters in the spectators gallery were not impressed. Some of the comments, "That's unnecessary," "Injustice," "Linda, you're a warrior for Christ," and finally, "She can still pray with her hands tied behind her back." In any event, we will continue to follow this matter. For Rebel News, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Folks, we know you love it when Rebel News brings you the other side of the story, but the fact is, we need your help. Unlike the mainstream media, we do not receive a nickel from the Justin Trudeau Liberals, nor would we accept such funding if offered. Please go to rebelfieldreports.com. That's rebelfieldreports.com. And if you're able to, kindly make a donation.